it's 90% mental, 10% physical. And I was like, don't you mean the other way around? And she's like, no. And I was like, I knew my body was at the limit. I'd heard it whispering many, many times, but I didn't listen. I'm like, sport's so black and white. Like, I love it. Like, I really didn't notice that I love black and white, and real world is great. I've tried a few things. I've failed greatly. I've learned a heck of a lot. They say an athlete dies twice. So I don't know if that means you've got a capacity to rebuild and go again. I might look at it that way.
Welcome back to another episode of Limitless. Today I'm very, very excited because we have a special guest with us. We have Emma Snowsill. She is an Olympic gold medalist from Beijing 2008. She is 3 times ITU world champion, and she is widely regarded as one of the greatest female triathletes in Olympic distance triathlon. And she's part of the World Triathlon Hall of Fame. Emma, a warm welcome to you. How are you today?
I'm very good. The warm welcome is, yes, very inviting. As I said, I'm in Andorra, and I'm not sure if it's snow or pollen, but it looks like a combination of both. So it's, yes, very contrary to where you currently are in the heat and humidity, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah, and we were just chatting off the record. We'd love to welcome you over to Phuket, Thailand. We have some wonderful triathlon groups here.
Yeah, I mean, it's had such a strong history, Phuket. When you said, 2008, I mean, even long before I was, coming through the ranks, the early 2000s, late 90s, like I always heard of Phuket Triathlon. So it's brilliant to hear that the sport is still going as strong as it is. And I think from what I can ascertain, from strength to strength in Asia.
Absolutely, and that's why we are excited to have you on the show. And as I was just looking on your Instagram before, also I see you are very active, involved in the sport. You were in Noosa at the race and other places. So tell us, are you still involved in the sport of triathlon, Emma?
I'm actually trying to work my way back in more into the athlete side, the federation side. I definitely tend to find a way to get myself back for Noosa. It's just it's a special place. It's obviously home, and trying to time it now with kids' school, it always falls in quite nicely. So I love being around that event in particular. It was the precipice for my career. It was really where my life shifted, I think, in terms of, chasing an Olympic dream in triathlon. And yeah, if I speak to now, I'm really looking and doing some study and looking at ways to get involved again with triathletes in the federation, but just as a broader scope, I guess, into that sort of mental aspect and space that we know so much about training, we know so much about monitoring our recovery and what we eat and all this, but I just think there's a huge component to the mind aspect, which I believe I was very fortunate to learn from other triathletes. And I often think that if you didn't have that, it can just be such a key factor in performance and what you miss, because we know they're interlinked. There's no discussion there, but it's how do you harness it and how do you utilize it when it comes to race day situations in particular.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, Emma, because these days, indeed, we talk more about the mental health and so on as part of the sport. And but what about in 2008 as a gold Olympic medalist? Was that something you were talking about then? Did you get that kind of emotional and mental support behind the scene?
It's so funny you mentioned that, because, touching base now with the federation, probably now the last 2 years, just getting closer back to the people that have now found their way back in, encouraged a few people to apply for jobs in the high performance department, that I saw a shift coming, and I felt, I think everybody knew in Australia that there needed to be a new shift. But coming and stepping back in and hearing people's roles. I mean, we have an athlete wellbeing and engagement manager, and I was like, that did not exist when I was, competing. I think we had more of the likes like athlete career. It was very much focused on, yes, career, which I think is part of the picture in terms of, being an athlete, wellbeing, health. It's a very broad brush. And I think the mental aspect, sort of like I alluded to, I think I was very fortunate to learn from some athletes in my training environment. I was very it was always the why, why, asking the questions, asked a lot of athletes. And if anything, it was actually Loretta Harrop who got silver in Athens that I recall her giving an interview. And after she hung up, I said, I think you need to correct what you just said, because you just said it's 90% mental, 10% physical. And I was like, don't you mean the other way around? And she's like, no. And I was like, okay. In my head, I'm like, okay, if I ever need to beat you, I have to train 10 times harder in order to beat you. And the concept, I didn't grasp it, but being around her and understanding what she meant and learning from other athletes in that training environment, her coach, it completely shifted the way what I knew I needed to understand in terms of what I needed to do mentally, not just physically. And so I think I was fortunate in that regard, and I probably sought maybe more of my own way, if that's probably I probably sought more of my own path in finding what worked for me, because I think it was very, maybe, institutionalized is a good thing in some respect, but if it's not always a one fits all, and a sports psychologist can work for a number of people. It's a great tool. They're a great asset to have, and if they work for you, but I do think there are other ways that can resonate with other people and other athletes to get out of them what they need. So I think it's, having a toolkit. So I think now we're looking at it more from this perspective of, we have a toolbox of people, of methods, of ways to go about it. It's not just a one size fits all. So I think there's been a big shift, and personally that's why I'm so interested, and why I'd like to get back involved, because I think there's a part of my experience that I would love to be able to help share with up-and-coming athletes. I desperately would love to see an Australian, back on top of the Olympic podium, especially Brisbane, if not before. And I just think, this sport has given me so much, and I would love to see ways, in small ways, is there a way I can contribute to others that have that Olympic dream?
That's wonderful, and we are so many who are really looking forward to seeing you back. Of course, more engaged in the sport is fantastic. Emma, as you rightly said, there will be many athletes who will be inspired and can learn from you. And wow, what you just shared, 90% mental, 10% physical. And we're talking perhaps one of the most extreme physically active sports in the world, don't we, with the triathlon? Already it's very tough physically as well.
Yeah, I think, I came to a point, and even in the brief times I've spoken with other athletes, just out of, I'd love to help, and whether you call that mentoring or not, but, I have a belief that, by the time you've whittled down the start line to, let's say, 55, 60 girls in a World Cup race, or, Ironman start lines, I mean, you're all maybe 0.1% difference in terms of physical, to get to that point, capability. So what is the difference on race day? What is your ability to cope with the pressures of the biggest race of the year, or the biggest race every 4 years? And I think coming to understand yourself better, everybody can train hard. That's something that we are refining in every aspect possible in this day and age. But to have the tools on race day, when you've put all the preparation in, like what's going on inside the head, what is that thing that, why do we keep seeing the champions keep repeating what they do? What is the success for them? Yeah, they all train hard, just like first to 10th does. I think it's that capacity for the mind and what it can do. But that also doesn't just appear on race day. That's something that's that's certainly something that's also got to be practiced just as much as recovery and nutrition and the training log.
Mm. And Emma, if we take you back to those days that you were at the peak, let's say around 2008, what was the hardest season of your life that perhaps we didn't see? What didn't we see, or what can't we see on Instagram and so on when we're looking at your success? How was it behind the scene?
Yeah, it's interesting, because obviously a lot of that only obviously comes with reflection. When you're in the thick of it, you're not always thinking about, what's been and gone. But I think, there's probably, I would say, like, my best years and I think any athlete would attest to that, is uninjured, is not sick, that consistency of racing, of training. But I think the part that probably, and probably an aspect that I'd love to probably share also, and I don't mean share to tell people my experiences, like help people learn not make the same mistakes, is that, come after Beijing, by the end of 2009, my body, I knew my body was at the limit. I'd heard it whispering many, many times, but I didn't listen. And I really did fall apart physically, or more my immune system, which in the end was led to my retirement. And I look at that now, and obviously everyone is privy to hindsight, and what are the things that I knew that I probably should have taken heed to earlier, or should have listened to. And I think the struggle with being at the top of your game, being somewhat in your most physically capable human state possible to compete on the world stage, to going to the other end of the spectrum and not even being able to walk 600 meters to the beach without needing a 2-hour nap. So I fell to a virus that really knocked me around, and I think it took me really years to recover, and I would say that the knowledge I have now and the process I went through now is probably something I would be very interested in sharing with athletes, that they don't go so far down that rabbit hole, because I did know the signs, I did see the signs, and I was a very aware athlete. But we can come victim, I think, sometimes to our invincibility sometimes, that we ride that wave of adrenaline, we ride that wave of but everything's like, I'm so fit, I don't want to lose my fitness. Like, everybody's aware of that, but it's the same in training. There's rest days, there's easy days for a reason, so that we can continue to make improvement. But it's that fine line of knowing, when you've gone over the edge, how to pull back and how to rest. It's no athlete loves to do, and the highest that type A personality, it's like the hardest thing for anyone to do, because there is a certain type of addiction to it, but and I believe it's a healthy one, but you need to also be able to know yourself and your signs, and to read the signs, that you don't find yourself in a place where you really dug the hole so far deep that to come back out of it is more effort than the easy day off every week, or whatever your coach prescribes, and when they prescribe based on what they see and know of you. So in that context, I think I think that's something I really didn't share, and probably something now I would really, as part of getting involved with the sport, like I said, not just the mental side, because that is the sharpening of the knife, and that is the sharpening of the edge to get to the top level competition. But I also know I the things I needed to do to keep myself in check and well and injury free. So it's riding that fine balance between knowing thyself and taking care of yourself and pushing the limits. And I think it's 100% possible. But my biggest struggle would have come post. Basically, about a year and a half after Beijing, that I got the virus, came and raced back too early. We raced in Seoul, where the water quality was pretty average, and picked up parasites, which, from what I know now, basically to have a virus and parasites are the two things to, basically like nuclear war on your immune system. And it took me an incredibly long time to get that back to a normal state. I came back with the goal of being a normal, functioning, flourishing human being, not an Olympic athlete. So that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah, thank you, Emma, for your vulnerability and for sharing that. And it sounds like a difficult time in your life indeed. And then you have also the role of perhaps the identity, being this athlete, and you perhaps starting to define yourself as that, being tied to the performance, the result, the medals, and everything else. What role would you say that identity and image played on you?
I think it's something you're not 100% aware of until you're not feeling like you've got that identity tied so closely. I mean, we are well aware of it now with so many athletes talking about this, and it's such an important topic, because I think sport, and this particularly endurance sport, is so all-encompassing. It's not a couple of training sessions per week. We're talking a couple of training sessions per day, and to be at the highest level, it does require an incredible amount of time commitment, dedication, but it's not just those physical hours, it's all the hours outside of it, dedicated to recovery and to nutrition and to rest, and what I think I was also still good at in that time is having a sense of, I'm just also Emma outside of it, I mean, may not have had the energetic Emma, the one that could, go run around like I normally could if I hadn't been, had the heavy workload of training. But I think I definitely had outlets of myself that were removed from sport, where I could just be myself. I had friends that knew me from school, so my core group of friends still knew me as that person, as much as I was the athlete at school, but it wasn't taught based on my races or training. It was very much removed, and I loved that. I really enjoyed and thrived off being a normal life. So I think when you flip the switch and you're no longer that athlete and you're always in normal life, it's kind of like, oh, but who am I now? And I think that's a really tricky place to be. And I think it takes quite a transition. And I think there's some athletes that can do it very well who have cultivated that sense of identity alongside themselves as an athlete. And I think that makes the transition far easier. Not to say it's without its challenges, but I think when there's that cut or that line in the sand, it could be illness, could be injury, something that really just stops it short. If you haven't had the opportunity maybe to cultivate a study or a career alongside of it, you do find yourself, but dare I say, sometimes in no man's land. I often say, and I've said to Jan, like, sport's so black and white. Like, I love it. Like, I really didn't notice that I love black and white, and real world is gray. Like, you're in the middle all the time, because you could say what you're doing. It was very identifiable as to what you did, why you did it, and everything you did that was aimed at getting the best out of yourself to fulfill that. But sometimes I think you're not aware of that when you're in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's quite a few professional athletes who fall into even perhaps a depression after when they leave the sport, because they feel lonely, isolated, and they can't really find themselves in a new role. I had a football player recently who won everything in the sport of professional football, and he hit a big depression and turned to even alcohol and drugs and so on when he left the sport, and he had to really hit hard rock bottom to rebuild himself. But it sounds like you were already valuing your personal life, and you had friends and so on outside of the sport, so the transition wasn't as hard for you, is what I'm hearing, Emma. But if any professional athlete is listening today, any tips or advice for them while they are still active in the sport?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about, like in a football, and I mean, they're so integrated into a team and to an environment where they're constantly seeing those people around them. I mean, triathletes are pretty, as you know, you're pretty much, you're on your own. You do a lot of training on your own. Yes, you occasionally, maybe you get to meet up and go swimming with someone, but it can be a very individualistic sport. And I would say from a personal point of view, I found it harder because I was still living away. And wasn't back in Australia as much as I sort of thought I may have been. And I think it would have been easier if I had been around those friends more often, my support group more often, and even going to the pool to not train to do a session, but seeing those familiar faces. So I think what you mentioned, like in the football sense, like it's all of a sudden you are in this group of people like-minded, and all of a sudden it's like you're teletransported out of this in a way, and you're in this other bubble, let's say, that, I actually don't know these people as well. And I think that's the key part, is like trying to cultivate this, that you remain this person outside of your sport. And I think what you described is, I think, extremely common, to be honest. I think sport does give us dopamine, does give us that hit, that sense of fulfillment, that sense of accomplishment, and take that away, take all the peer circle you've got around it that are constantly training. I mean, it can be so similar in injury as well. All of a sudden it's like, well, you're going to rehab, you're not coming to training. So you're just sitting there talking to the physio. It's different. It's tricky. So I think, having that sense of, whether that's community, and community can mean giving back. Can it mean doing school visits? Can it mean, you still have this connection to it, but you're not completely, the umbilical cord's not severed immediately. And yeah, I think some people sometimes, there's personalities that do need to hit rock bottom and to find their way, and there are others that can see that beforehand and realize that, having me, the person outside of the number on my jersey or, my name on my back when I race, that's really important, to have those people around you that are not just interested in, how was your last match? When's your next one? What was your, what's the training been like? All the things that go with being an athlete, which are so normal to us. But I think engaging yourself in other hobbies, other interests, other things that don't detract from what you're doing, they actually add to you as a person. And I think that's a part that is really key to helping that transition, I think, from what I've also noticed.
Yeah, and we have quite a few from the corporate world also, as well as entrepreneurs listening to this show, Emma. And I often draw parallels between the sport and also the corporate world. There's a lot of companies going for mergers, acquisitions. There's layoffs happening the whole time. And what I found in my line of work is that it's quite similar in the sense that an athlete perhaps spends so much time and energy and effort and building themselves up in the sport. But if someone has perhaps spent 10 or 20 years building a business and then perhaps it goes bankrupt or they lose it or they let go, then they're also losing their identity and everything with it, as well as the income overnight. And so they can also find that themselves sort of in the similar kind of crisis. For you then, Emma, when you retired, I understand the circumstances now that it was due to what happened to you after Beijing with the infection and so on. And then later on, what other projects did you have in your life? Was there any company or business or social work or anything else that have kept you busy since then?
Yeah, so I immediately turned my time to studying, probably even before I retired, as I was maybe the last year, I was always very interested in the human body and in nutrition. It was something I think we were fortunately had grown up with. And I think that was something that, it was understandable and something that I, now want to reignite and look at and not from a nutritionist point of view, but just that whole body, whole mind point of view, like an all-round athlete and any age athlete, really. I think athlete or not, humans have that capability and capacity. And I think a lot of us are hardwired to want to get the best out of ourselves. And that does mean, work, rest and play. And I think that's something, again, I would say, if I go into the next phase, 2 young kids, opening a cafe, some tourist apartments. I put all my eggs very much in one basket and really tried to do my very best. But yeah, it was a huge learning curve for me, being on the other side of the fence and not having maybe the support network that I'd realized I had cultivated as an athlete, between physios, masseurs, acupuncturists. I was like, well, it's not physically demanding, but it was far harder. Putting myself into a business and especially on the other side of the world and really not having a whole lot of knowledge about a lot of it. I also learned the hard way. Like, I really learned the hard way, and I really came undone again. I really pushed hard to make it work and did everything I could and survived on very little sleep and the time COVID came around, well, guess who was an amazing recipient for another virus? Some people are like, oh yeah, I had COVID, and no, that I was on this carpet with fevers and wiped out again for many months. So, you know, we all find the lessons we're trying to be served in many ways, you know. So since retiring, cafe owner, apartments, tourist apartments, in coinciding also with the pandemic, Jan and I had the opportunity to have a bit of a social project in Girona, and we built a pump track in Spain, in Girona, for kids in the neighbouring town that didn't have a whole lot of sporting facilities available to them or opportunities. And yeah, so it all goes very quickly now, he said that. But yeah, I'd have to say, like, I've tried a few things. I've failed greatly. I've learned a heck of a lot. There's many things that I'm like, whoa, okay, I definitely learned that the hard way. But it's shown me again that you need a team of people around you to help you, to support you, maybe not even help you, just to support you. And the all or nothing approach of an athlete doesn't necessarily work quite so well in the real world, especially with 2 young kids. And it's an interesting dynamic, but, you know, one has to go there and try in order to find where the happy medium is. And like I said, the cafe now is in wonderful hands, and I think within a few days I was back studying. So I was studying and now looking to just to see how, I think exactly like what you discuss on this podcast is, like, you know, helping people to see, like, you know, be their own limitless, really. Like, I do believe that we all have capacity and capabilities, but it's not always all at once either. You know, there's different times and seasons of our life that we can somewhat do maybe more, and others that we don't. And like you said about, you know, people in business, and there's a lot of high pressure and a lot of high stakes and a lot of stress. And as an athlete, you can kind of compartmentalize that for yourself and sometimes use it as fuel to your fire. But in the real world, that's really hard, I think, trying to juggle that energy, the personalities, you know, not take things personally as well. And I think it comes back to is, like, maintaining, again, that sense of, like, and I don't want to say purpose, because that's also a word that's thrown around a lot, but it's this purpose of self, of, like, what are the things I need to do to keep myself, you know, as in regular balance per se as possible. And balance doesn't mean having everything under control all the time. It's sometimes things are really out of balance, but when is the right time to pull back and be like, okay, you know, this stress is now getting too much. I'm not listening to my health. I need to pull back. And you made it, something came to mind as you're talking about, you know, particularly business people, but we always laugh, like, as an athlete, you retire at, well, swimmers, early 20s, triathletes, mid 30s. But in retirement terms from work, it's so much older. So, you know, like they say, an athlete dies twice. So I don't know if that means you've got a capacity to rebuild and go again. I might look at it that way. But I think it's really learning to understand and manage your own energy, you know, and I think everyone's different with that too. You know, what some people can cope with and have the capacity for can be very different to the person in the boardroom next to you or in the lane next to you swimming. And there's really no use in comparing, because at the end of the day, you need to know what serves you well. And if I use my own analogy of not, you know, falling off the cliff and crawling my way back up, it's like, how do I keep in my lane to the best of my capability, and keep that the enduring, you know, and that being able to weather the difficult situations, the tough situations, the hard business deals, or ones that didn't work, or are they failure, or are they ways in which I have to look at, okay, yes, really hard, really frustrating, how do I do it better next time? And as an athlete, I think you get really good at learning that, but applying it sounds easy, but it's it's tricky. I still find myself getting unstuck.
Fantastic, Emma. We're coming towards the end of the show today, Emma, but I have a few questions more. And one is, if you could sit down with yourself, a younger self, Emma, before the Beijing Olympics, knowing everything you know now about life, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting one, because I honestly think I had an epiphany before Beijing Olympics. And that's where I come back to, like, people around you. And I personally believe that, and I was very much training on my own in the last kind of, what would it be? Yeah, last few years. I'm going to have to go back and think, but definitely the last 2 to 3 years before Beijing. But the one person that was like my I would say, yeah, I guess they're my mentor, but just that person I would bounce ideas was Dennis Cottrell, who was the Olympic swim coach of Grant Hackett. So I thought, well, coach kind of the best 1,500 meter swimmer in the world. My race starts with that. That's probably a good place to make sure I go and swim train. And he had been my development coach as a young swimmer. And the reason I bring this story up is because he was the person that 3 weeks out from Beijing, we were in Australia and we'd stayed there, and I had become very dialed. Like, I knew what I needed to do day in, day out. I knew the sessions. I didn't even need to write it down. I knew what I needed, the times I needed to hit. I knew the points on the path I needed to surpass, knowing that I'd gotten fitter. And I just had a moment in the pool. I just had a morning, I think it was like a Wednesday, 2.5 weeks out from the race, and I was just toast, like so toast. I'd overdone it. I had honestly peaked too early. And he said, you need to get out and you need to go home and rest. And I was like, no, today I've got on. This is what I need to do. He's like, you won't make it to the start line if you don't rest now. And I was just like reeling in my head, absolutely reeling. And I think what it was one, I trusted his advice for a start. I did get out of the pool. I did go home for a nap, but I did go for another little jog that afternoon. I was like, I just don't know if I can do this. But I went for an easy jog, and I was at home on the Gold Coast where I lived. And I literally remember running alongside the path on the beach and looking out to the ocean. I was like, you know what? In 3 weeks' time, if I come back here, whether I've got a medal, no medal, gold, silver, bronze, it's not going to matter. Like, the waves are still going to come hitting the shore. This is all still going to be here. All the people I see every day and probably run past too fast and annoy them, they're still going to say hello and wave. Like, it's actually not that big a deal. And I realized then that I'd put so much external pressure on myself and internal. And I think that was like a little bit of this inner child reminder of being like, you thought of this as an 11-year-old on the couch. Like, this is what you wanted. Like, you're there. You're actually going. And I think that was honestly kind of one of the most fortunate things that could have happened to me, because I came and had such amazing energy. I was not overwhelmed by the Olympic experience, because it reminded me of that little kid. And I think sometimes, without having to maybe go down that hole, is like knowing those cues and knowing for yourself, it is, in the grand scheme of things, an amazing goal to have. And it would be amazing if this business deal worked out, and it would be incredible if X, Y, Z. But if it doesn't, are the things that are most important to me still going to be there? And I think most of the time people can answer yes to that. And when you strip away the expectations and the pressure that builds with your own experience and of what you put on yourself, I think most of us will find that inner child is still the one sitting there going, remember that time, we've been from there and we've gone to there and we've gone to there, but look how proud you'd be if you were sitting back here now saying that you were so close to making it and saying you'd get to this point. And I think that's a really, I think that's an important tool, a reflection and a reminder to sometimes not take life so seriously, as much as we all get serious as adults. I think it's that reminder to realize how far we've come. And as a kid, I think we just don't dwell on our mistakes as much as we do as adults.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to end today's conversation, Emma. I think you're given so much inspiration here to our listeners, and it's fantastic to hear that you're back in studying and you're going to give back more to the sport. And I'm sure there's many athletes who can learn a lot from you. Emma, anything I forgot to ask you? Any last message that you want to leave to the listeners of this podcast before we let you go?
Oh, no, I think I think it's always, you have to try and enjoy the ride. I'd love to come over and to your part of the world and see the world of sport and business. And obviously I see a little bit through the lens of my sister in Singapore. And yeah, I just think the world is an incredibly diverse place and people and triathlon is an amazing community that makes connection. And I think, whether you're as closely aligned and as tight to it as what I once was, or can sit on the periphery at times with watching Jan be involved and being a support mechanism there, to finding my way and realizing that, we all have something to give in some way or another. And I think, if you can find that thread somewhere or something, whether it's at the swimming pool or a joint business idea, I think it's really important to keep cultivating connection and community, because in the end, we're all human.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma, and thanks to all the listeners as well. And I wish you all the best and a good summer ahead to you, Emma, in Europe.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. If all else fails, I come to the endless summer in Asia.
Thank you, and bye for now.